And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Well, at the home of the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network, coalitionradionetwork.com. In the bunker, if you will, in a secure location in the hills surrounding Providence, Rhode Island. Co-hosting with me tonight are my good friends Dick Cheney and Spiro Agnew. They prefer, however, to remain off camera so as not to be a target. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. The mothership at coalitionradio.us, where links to this and, of course, our civil liberties page can be found. Now, the ACLU, by the way, released a white paper. I haven't been able to dive into it quite yet. We've got it up there, though, and you'll see it shared on the Facebook that discusses, if you will, the civil liberty issues surrounding cell phones and tracking cell phones. I got to sit on a press call today. It was me, Politico, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and of course the Coalition Radio. Maybe next time I won't be so afraid as to. Next time I'm going to ask a question. But we're big fans of the ACLU here at the Coalition because of the yeoman's work they do in looking at all the issues. I've always said that anytime I bring them up to people, somebody gets annoyed. And my conviction is if you're involved in civil liberties and if you haven't pissed off everybody at some point, you're not doing your job. So there you go. So check that out on the Civil Liberties log at coalitionradio.us. Well, joining us is someone who now officially qualifies as a repeat offender. He joined us last week in literally one of our opening nights. This iteration of Coalition Radio has been in business, if you will, for about 2 weeks now. Thank God for super producer Joel, who is able to do whatever he has to do to somehow keep this together. We had some bandwidth issues last time, so we said, okay, let's get together and tape something because the spirit was there. The love was there in the air. We could feel it, and we just need to kind of refine the tech a little bit. So joining us again, he's in the competition, in the hunt, if you will, the tiger hunt for the nomination of the Libertarian Party of America for the President of the United States is Mark Whitney from the great state of California. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Here we are, a native of Westerly, Rhode Island. My mother and I both born there at the Westerly Hospital. Yep.
Wow, and the way things are going here, there may not be much more left at a certain point. It's getting pretty rugged here in Little Rhodey. Our governor is
rugged everywhere. I feel like running for president right now as a libertarian. I feel like at least the New York Yankees have certainty, right? They know they don't have to suit up. They don't have to go down to the stadium. They know the game has been called off. I feel like the game has been called off, but I still have to play. That's how I feel right now. It's a weird thing to be running for president, but not have any debates to do and no hands to shake and not knowing whether there's going to be a national convention or if there is, whether there's going to be a national debate. And it's just everything is up in the air right now. But I keep running as if things are normal. I'm doing the best I can here.
No, absolutely. We covered a little bases. We'll recover them in a few minutes. But, there's been a couple of events in the election. Bernie bailed again. I'm going to give you my take. I'm going to give you my take really quickly, and then I'd love your reaction to that. This is the second time he's run. He has accepted gifts in the form of hundreds of millions of dollars from ordinary Americans.
Yeah.
And while I may not agree with his politics per se, I will say this. I don't know why he gives up so easily. If the only thing standing between me and the nomination of the presidency of the United States, Joe Biden, really? I mean, I get the fact that the delegate math sucks, and I get the fact that the National Party doesn't want you to go anywhere. But that doesn't. I'm not thinking that at this point in time, you would say uncle if it was you and crazy Joe Biden, would you? What do you think?
Especially since they just extended the convention, the Democrats. They just pushed it from July to August. That gives Joe Biden another month to drop dead. I mean, he's really close. He's very close right now.
Oh man,
I have this belief that he is the result of a taxidermist and no one's told him yet. It's just
weekend at Uncle Joe's.
Right. Weekend at Biden's. He did a video from his house, similar to what I'm doing here in my studio. The production value was 10% of what you and I have right now, Pat.
Mm-hmm.
And he barely had the wind to get a sentence out of his mouth. He was reading from a teleprompter, and it really was like Weekend at Bernie's. It was very much like that.
I mean, I'm never going to focus on personal appearance, but I gotta say, since it's just us talking right now, right? No one's going to listen to us. I mean, this cadaver-like appearance scares the crap out of me. He reminds me of the guy.
Commit to the bit. Yeah, commit to the bit. And nominate a dead guy. I mean, just commit to it. Don't screw around. Just make the full commitment. You know.
I mean,
you mentioned Spiro Agnew. Just nominate him.
While we're at it, I mean, Christ, remember It's a Wonderful Life. He is Mr. Potter. But on a serious note, though, all right, his career, and I'd love your reaction to this. His career has been the polar opposite of everything that Democrats say they stand for. He was an architect of the war on drugs. He is in the absolute elite of warmongers. He's been a racist, a misogynist, an anti-feminist. That is not my conspiracy theories. That is the body of work of his career. You get the nomination.
Absolutely.
You're running against Biden. Are you going to call him out? Because it doesn't seem like anybody else wants to. Are you going to call him out?
Yeah, I mean, he literally is the guy who sponsored the legislation as a senator together with Ted Kennedy. Listen to these four, right? Joe Biden. You think there's a difference between Democrats and Republicans. Joe Biden, Ted Kennedy, Jesse Helms, and Strom Thurmond co-sponsored the legislation in 1984 that became the new Jim Crow. It was those four guys, those four senators co-sponsored that legislation. As someone who was going through the criminal justice system at that time, I have read every page and every word of this legislative history. And let me tell you something. And not only that, he's a senator from Delaware. He's the guy that the banks go to. He's the guy the credit card companies go to be able to charge the usurious interest and create terms of agreements that are written in 2-point font that the only person who've read those terms of agreements is the lawyer who wrote it and his mother. No one else can navigate that stuff.
I mean, he literally and here's the crazy part. Because of his advanced appearance, if you will, all right, and he comes off as this grandfatherly figure, and yet he is the epitome of statism, the absolute epitome. In fact, I can't think of another recent candidate / turned president, even the orange one, who represents the worst of American statism.
Trump. I mean, Trump represents Trump. That's who he represents. But Biden is, as you know, Biden has this big smile, and boy, it just goes to show what you can get away with if you have a big smile on the day of TV. You know, I mean, but these are hard times for Joe Biden because it's very difficult for him to sniff women from 6 feet away. So, you don't want to be Joe Biden right now. I mean, these are not good times at all.
No. He's going to get out his AR-16, and he's going to kick your ass. Don't you know that?
Well, on a serious note, though, really, this is a great time to be an incumbent politician. The voting this year is going to be the lowest it's ever been, and if you're an incumbent, this virus is like 100 years of gerrymandering in 30 days. I mean, it's the best thing for incumbents.
Now, although I'm going to say this, for the candidates on the Libertarian Party, if nominated, can adopt to the digital, and I hate to say the digital age because that makes me sound like a geezer myself, but but heck, I run a digital
it also sounds
news station.
Slightly pornographic.
Yeah. Well, true. But the folks that can adapt digitally, I had on the air the other night Spike Cohen, and he came up with a great point. I love your reaction to this. Because of the current conditions, candidates are no longer, the big Democratic, Republican candidates are no longer able to go out to the big stadiums and turn out the guaranteed union help or the guaranteed banksters.
That's a great point.
They lose the trappings of either the incumbency or just shall we say the exalted position as being part of the duopoly. In a sense,
right.
They have to go out and reach individual Americans just like everyone else, and touch them somehow digitally. And so that gives us an opportunity. You like that, huh? What was the movie?
You just said that, didn't you?
What was
That's
it?
Fine. You know
what
who you're talking to, right? Jesus.
What was the movie about the teacher?
I'm doing my best here, Pat. I'm doing my fight. My tongue.
Listen, I'm giving you softballs. All right.
God, there's a straight man in the house.
So, do we have a symbols?
Yeah.
I'm asking my producer. Hold on. Do we have symbols? I think we need those. So, okay, there you go.
George Carlin used to say, "I leave symbols to the simple-minded."
And as I would say, I resemble that remark.
Yes, exactly.
So, but we have an opportunity, unparalleled opportunity, to reach out to the electorate and communicate our ideas, minus competing with the pomp and circumstance of the duopoly. And we do have the symbols, by the way. So let's talk about your campaign then. You got the opportunity to really take on Trump, and you got the opportunity to really take on Biden. We will have a convention and a nomination, I believe, months earlier than they will. What's going to be your approach as you get the nomination to actually take it to the streets, to take it to them? In 2016. Two candidates Gary Johnson, who I have a great deal of personal admiration for, I think the campaign made a critical mistake by taking the first 2 or 3 weeks of the convention effectively off. You get the nomination. What happens the next morning after the parties, after the bonanza? What happens?
Look, I just start going off on the war on terror, the war on drugs, the war on trade. I start talking about how the fact that Donald Trump is an open mic comic, and the reason I was nominated is because I'm the real thing, and America needs a better joke, and I'm it. And mockery and satire and all the tools of the master storyteller. I will be talking about issues that we have 75% in common with our fellow citizens. Like I said, the 3 wars: trade, drug, and terror. The federal government in the last 30 days has increased the federal budget by 50%, and they're getting ready to increase it by another, but to make that 100% in the next 30 days. Pelosi wants another trillion in another $1 trillion, what I call borrowing bill, not spending bill. Trump wants it to be another $2 trillion, and I'm guessing he wants that because he's thinking maybe they'll forget to exempt Mar-a-Lago from this bill like they did the first time around. Trump, I think, has done a good job of doing his rallies from the White House press room there, but the guy barely knows what the day of the week is, and everybody knows that we have a president who's never even read the Bill of Rights. If I said that to a diverse group of a random room of 1,000 citizens, nobody would disagree, including the 30% in there who would follow Trump off a cliff. The reason this guy and not be impeached is because the radical has become the establishment, and the establishment, which is the Libertarian Party platform and the Bill of Rights, has become radical. And so if I'm the nominee, that's what I'm going to be crowing about.
So let's start going down the issues one by one. Again, on one hand, you're at a debate. You got Joe Biden to deal with, and you've got Trump. What's the points that you like to make, and how do you direct them at the duopoly?
I think the challenge in a debate with with both of these guys is to not be ignored, is to do everything you can to not be ignored. And I've been on my feet, running my mouth for the last 40 years in every sort of setting. I've worked in stand-up comedy clubs all over the country, independent theaters all over the country. So I am as comfortable in there. There's no stage too big for me. That, in fact, the bigger the stage, the happier I am. More people in the audience, the happier I am. The more that's at stake, the happier I am. And Donald Trump would be at a disadvantage with me on the stage because I know what an open mic comic he is. I know that he's the guy who gets a laugh because he farts in church. Not and by that I mean he's able to get laughs, very low level laughs, because he does things that presidents aren't meant to do in very serious settings. That's why I use this analogy: the guy who farts in church. But he doesn't. Trump doesn't have a leg to stand on when it comes to the war on terror. You'll recall that Obama was killing citizens with missiles, and the most egregious offense that Obama committed, in my opinion, was killing that 16-year-old boy, Abdul Rahman Alaki, who was born in Denver. He killed this 16-year-old kid with a missile who was accused of nothing while he was peacefully talking to some friends in Yemen. And then Trump killed that boy's 7-year-old daughter, who was also born here in the United States. Nobody knows Trump killed that girl with a missile. And in fairness to the fact that nobody knows that, we haven't been getting much news on the aggressive war because Trump has kept the war machine, the drone war machine, hidden in the CIA, where Obama moved it from the Department of Defense. When it comes to economics, the Republicans now have, come on, they're wanting to outspend the Democrats now. So it's a contest between these two corporate branches, these two corporate parties, to see who can continue to buy voters while this virus plays out. And we know, Pat, we know this, right? We know that these measures that are being put in now, which are couched as temporary, we know as civil libertarians what happens. These things become permanent. They're always couched as temporary. A week after 9/11, Congress, with the exception of one person, unanimously passed Public Law 107-40, which became the Global War on Terror. And that law is now used to just indiscriminately kill people around the world who in groups that did not even exist at the time that law was passed. We know that the Defense Production Act came out of, I think, the Korean War or World War II many, many years ago. And the Defense Production Act is now being touted by both the Democrats and Republicans and what we now call the mainstream media, being touted as the way to go to protect American citizens from a health concern. So that we're meant to have martial law in the United States. We're meant to commandeer industry, order industry to stop doing what they're doing and start producing things that we need to protect ourselves from a health concern, not from a nation state. So this is the slippery slope that happens. They always say, oh, we're going to put a sunset provision on it, right? But then they sunset the sunset provision, usually on a Christmas Eve when nobody is paying attention, and the thing becomes permanent. And that's what we libertarians have to guard against.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the slow mission creep of our attack on our civil liberties started in the wake of 9/11, has never ended. We continue to have reenactments and renewals of the Patriot Act, if you will, in every perspective. Americans are still being spied on by their own government. And now, under the guise of an illness, we've got politicians in America, both at the state and federal level, actually discussing in public the notion of citizen tracking, that somehow that is acceptable at any level. And as libertarians, we couch it always in saying we understand the severity of the health crisis. But again, Mark, wasn't the Constitution and its protections to civil liberties created for just this circumstance? Wasn't that the point?
Absolutely. There's no provision in the Constitution for the Constitution to be suspended. The Libertarian Party platform restates that by simply adopting a principle that the Constitution shall not be suspended ever, even in wartime. And this is not wartime. We are much too quick to jump to words like hate and jump to words like war to justify the warlike conduct. Unfortunately, the people have been so conditioned. We don't have anybody in the Wall Street traded media standing guard. It's shows like this. It's acts of citizen journalism. It shows like we're both engaged in active citizen journalism. I'm probably doing 10 to 15 interviews a week with people who are engaged in citizen journalism. I can't get booked with Rachel Maddow. I can't get booked with Sean Hannity. I can't get an interview with the New York Times or CNN. So the only opportunity we have to preserve and reinstate our constitutional republic is through these collective acts of citizen journalism, because the people know what's going on. They just don't know what to do about it. They don't understand the tools that they have available to them as citizens. This is something that has not been part of the conversation, especially since 9/11. We are conditioned, collectively, the majority of citizens is conditioned to adopt a zero tolerance mentality whenever something bad happens, and to demand absolute protection from the government, when it's actually the government who should be looking to be protecting itself from the people, because it's the government that should be looking over its shoulder, not the people.
Right, exactly. So, in who better than, say, Joe Biden, who was the architect of literally everything wrong with America right now. There is a positive message we can promote, and that's the notion that the existing government adopted very quickly libertarian principles in order to react to this crisis. And at the same time, it's what we call here at the Coalition proof of concept that the libertarian message, if in fact had been in place, might have mitigated the damage this has done. How would you communicate that to what we lovingly refer to in the libertarian world as normies? How do you do that without being seen as spiking the football?
Yeah, in the comedy world, we refer to non-comedians as the regulars. We have a thing like that too. The way, first of all, if I was in one of the 51 chief executive positions in this country as a governor or the president, the first thing I would do, and the most important thing I would emphasize, is that I'm being honest with the people. In other words, I would be very honest and be very clear in saying, I do not have the authority to tell you to close your business. I do not have the authority to tell you to stay home. But this position that you've elected me to, I do happen to have access to some people who are really informed on science, to some very informed people in medicine. So we have some guidelines that we've put together, but the people have not given me the authority to suspend the Constitution. But this is maybe an opportunity for us to all engage in individual acts of common sense. And that's what's lacking right now. What is becoming increasingly clear right now is how arbitrary everything is. So you have, we had an incident here in San Diego with a Navy ship where the guy running the ship, he's saying, look, I'm out here and these people, my sailors here are in close quarters, and they didn't sign up to, they signed up for the death penalty if they're fighting the enemy. They didn't sign up for the death penalty because they're on a ship at sea and they're all at risk of dying from this virus. This guy's been criticized for doing that. If you've got a kid who's 18 or 19 or 20 years old who signed up to go in the Navy, they didn't sign up to needlessly die on a ship at sea. And then we have incidents where Mike Pence is out there giving a speech, lecturing people who are working for $15 an hour at a grocery store and telling them they got to get out there and do their jobs, while at the same time telling other people who provide us with food that is not sold in grocery stores that they need to close their business. So I could go on and on, but it's all very arbitrary as to who is being ordered to not make money and who is being ordered to make money. And the other thing, Pat, this is something I was talking about yesterday on my show. Maybe you could shed some light on this. Last time I checked, whenever the president of the United States and the legislature cannot come to terms on a budget, about 90% of the federal government is declared non-essential. Where are the non-essential federal and state layoffs? And I don't wish poverty on anybody, but I'm pointing out the arbitrary nature of it. It seems like the vast majority of economic harm has been posed by the public sector on the private sector, but the public sector, in the face of this, is doubling in size.
That's an outstanding point. Right now, at the state level, I can only speak to this part of New England, but there have been not even the suggestion of layoffs in the dreaded public sector.
Right.
Whereas the private sector has, I think the term is immolated. We're looking at a post-apocalyptic, dystopic private sector at this point. In Rhode Island, for example, we're a great deal of the gross state product is based on tourism. We've got an amazing restaurant environment here, in large part to some of the culinary schools and the art schools in the state.
Yep.
It's really the lifeblood of the state.
The Rhode Island School of Design, the Rhode Island Culinary, all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. So that has been effectively destroyed. And so, at the same time, and no one's looking to have the guy who's the janitor at the local state hospital get laid off, but the $160,000 contract manager for whom the contracts can't even take place right now because the people that are contracted to aren't in business. They need to there's no shared sacrifice. I mean, Mark, you and I are of a certain age. We're probably right around the same age. Whatever happened to shared sacrifice? Is that exist anymore in America?
That is really the rhetorical argument I'm making. I get criticized when I talk about this among non-libertarians in particular, but I trust people to use their common sense, and I think that the arbitrariness of this entire culture that's been created in the last 30 or 45 days is really hammered home when you look at all the harm to the private sector, and the government is doubling in its economic power and in its authority. And I don't see anybody asking these questions. I mean, it hit me like a brick about 36 hours ago. I'm like, okay, look, if 80% of the businesses in the United States are owned by a mom or pop or one or two people who have gone into business together, and these businesses are being devastated. I don't wish, like you, I don't wish devastation on people working for the government. I'm just sitting here looking at this situation, and I'm saying, okay, if it's okay for government workers to be getting paid and working in close quarters or whatever they're doing, why is it not okay for somebody to have their restaurant open and have people seated 3 tables apart? Why is that not okay?
Yeah, so the other thing I'd love to float by you. There's the notion out there, and it's being, as you know, ideas aren't simply discussed with the American people; they're trial ballooned, and they're floated out there in a variety of, let's just say, friendly media circles. There's always a quid pro quo in the major media.
Right.
You help us with this. You float this idea for us. You'll get an exclusive later. You'll get some clicks now. A lot of major media is driven by clicks. So the idea is being floated out there is that the government is going, you ready for this? No one's drinking any hot liquids out there who are listening, right? Is that President Trump is going to put together some panel to discuss how to reopen the economy.
Uh-huh. Well, you don't really need a panel for that. You just need to stop saying stupid stuff.
I mean,
just
the nerve. The sheer nerve that we need the government to reopen. See, this is how it's going to work. We just had a guy named Mike Underwood, who is because we're featuring local businesses here in New England, guys who are still managing to stay open, and we're trying to find ways, as citizen journalists, to direct business to them. So I said to him, do you need the government to tell you to go out to work tomorrow? And he thought about it, and he goes, nah, I got the banks telling me, I got my insurance company telling me, I got my suppliers telling me, and most importantly, I got my wife telling me, you better get your ass out to work tomorrow. So but the arrogance of them, somehow, they've destroyed this. Yeah. They've broken it. Do I want the people who've broken it to try and fix it?
No, I mean, it's a whole different approach. The difference between the private sector and the public sector is that anything, and I'm not an anarchist. I'm not one of these people who wants to get rid of all government, but the nature of government is that you have to get a majority of the people together to agree that if you do A, you're going to get a certain outcome. And then when you don't get that certain outcome, they get a majority of people together to double down on trying to get that outcome. In the private sector, what we do is we sit down with a blank sheet of paper, we sketch out an idea, and we give it a try. And then we learn something from taking that action. And then a drop-down menu appears with 3 options that wouldn't have appeared if we never took that action. And we try that, and we continually A/B test. It's not an outcome-oriented approach to life. It is an approach to building business that relies on constant paying attention to the market, reacting to the market, and adjusting based on the messages you get from the market. there's not a single business that's ever been started where somebody sits down and says, if I do A, I'm going to get B. It just doesn't. That's not how creativity works. It's not how anything works. But with government, when they define it, they put it in a box, and then when it doesn't work out, they double down on the box, and that's why government always needs to be the last resort for just the things that are the most necessary and most obvious, like, for instance, preserving our right to be here and engage in uncensored acts of political speech, just as citizen journalists, which is really what we are right now.
Right. The point being that government, and this is where everything's been flipped on side of its head. Government shouldn't be protecting us from acts like this. Government shouldn't be protecting us, if you will, from the right to bear arms, to engage in self-protection against, harmful forces, whether they be domestic or governmental based. Government shouldn't be protecting us from bad results in the economy. Government should be simply there to ensure that we have an environment where we can take the risk we want when we want. That government should simply be laying back and only enforce laws that prevent us from bearing arms to engage in self-protection against criminals or a government. Government should be only exist, if you will, basically to protect the most fundamental property rights. Other than that, this guy Mike, who's sort of a regular guy, smart, runs a tough business, he just wanted them to get the hell out of the way. How do we as libertarians boil down the message at a point like this in American history? We tell them, just get out of our way. How do we coalesce like that?
Well, the libertarians need to become more political. The Libertarian Party right now, to my way of thinking, is not a political party. It is a political party in name only. And one of the reasons I'm involved in the party as a candidate, as opposed running for a high-level office, as opposed to someone, say, running for the Libertarian National Committee, is I feel I can have more of an influence on the culture of the party. I'm a Gene Burns libertarian. I know you know Gene Burns. I think talk about anarchy and rolling up the United States is nonsense. The federal government was created to secure our fundamental rights. That's why it exists. It is morphed into this thing with tentacles that, there's no universe in which I should be sending 3 times the taxes to the federal government as I send to my state. If anything, it should be the other way around. And I'm not saying I want it to be the other way around, but the way things were originally constructed, that is the way that it was designed to be. That we would have 50 states competing with each other, and it would be easier for us as citizens. It's much easier for me as a resident of Rhode Island to get together a group of people and lobby the state legislature to elevate the education system of Rhode Island with more competition than it is for me to do so at the federal level. So it just what I've been saying lately is that the enemy is the Republican Democratic National Committee, and the byproduct of these committees, the politicians that come out of these committees, they have collectively and in a bipartisan way taken the Bill of Rights, which I often will say the bones are good, and they've taken this very meaty, tough, chewy meat and put it on these bones to such an extent that it's unrecognizable. And just to call back to what I say before, the radical has become the establishment, and the establishment has become radical. I'm about as normal and average common man as there is. I come from just a very average family, a public school teacher in New England. My dad never owned a house. He's one of these guys that thought if he had checks, he had money, and we never had the money we needed. It's just a really average kind of lower, not even middle class family with sort of upper middle class aspirations. So I can't wrap my mind around spending money you don't have as an entrepreneur. It just doesn't. That model doesn't work in the private sector. The federal government we had before this virus was borrowing 50 cents on the dollar. I don't even know what the hell the math is now. They're borrowing 150 cents on the dollar, I think, right now, and that is not okay. The people take examples from the government, and people end up modeling that behavior, and that's a sad enough thing as it is. But But this idea of normalizing that, every time there's a hurricane, people want the president to go to that town and give them a hug. When somebody gets shot at school, they want the president to go give them a hug. Not the mayor, not the governor, the president. The presidents have turned into these deified figures that just have the ability to just print pretend money and just pass it out. But Bernie Sanders was saying that everybody should continue to receive their full paycheck while we're enduring this virus. That's not a thing. That can't happen. So we're really living in Alice in Wonderland right now. And I'll tell you, Pat, in my opinion, it's going to be really important for people who understand civil liberties, lowercase libertarians, uppercase libertarians, and right-minded independents to really pay attention closely as this is going on, to keep track of laws that the Republicans and Democrats and leadership themselves admit are no longer necessary. They've suspended a lot of laws during this time. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're suspending them now, let's just make that permanent. Let's keep track of those opportunities. And of course, in the private sector, there is going to be economic devastation. There's going to be unemployment of 35%. But the private sector has a way of creating opportunities out of this devastation. So I've been telling people on my show and anytime I speak to, make sure you keep a journal, make sure you're doing things to make sure you're writing down every idea you can come up with. I've encouraged people to promise themselves tomorrow, if they've never done so, to start a business tomorrow and just knock on your neighbor's door and see what they need for services and start providing those services and learn how it feels to be a rainmaker. See how you feel about your life. I often joke that desperation is the mother of invention, and God damn it, when I'm president, all Americans will be desperate.
Listen, Mark, I love your reaction to the statement I'm about to make. Failure is a critical component of free markets. Failure cleanses the market, and failure is what creates opportunity for people, individuals, businesses, partnerships, who, whether it be innovation,
Absolutely.
whether it be sheer hard work, whether it be the correct mix of risk capital and investment, to succeed. And in the absence of success, the market is no longer energized. There is nothing to aspire to. There is no reason to innovate. We have created, if you will, or I should say we've eliminated the moral hazard of failure in this country. There was a time 2 months ago when Bernie Sanders proposed $1 trillion to wipe out the educational loans and to provide free college, people said he was simply insane. A month and a half later, 2 months into this, as we've watched our nation print a couple of $1 trillion, and just like that, the Bernie Sanders people have turned around and said, well, you could do it for the banksters. Why can't you do it for the college students? And while you and I understand
that's the answer.
Right. but you and I understand the
fundamental in the question.
Yeah. Right. But on a superficial level, how do we turn to the Bernie Sanders people and say, no, you can't do that, when the entire Republican model for this has been to eliminate the moral hazard to failure? There are all sorts of operations in this country who are using government and government funds as an excuse to stay in business for issues that were in place long before the last 3 or 4 weeks. How do we recreate a market and a free market in this country at this point in our history? Is it possible?
Well, that's the fundamental difference between the public and private sector. In the private sector, every problem is an opportunity to create a new industry code. That's literally true. If you we've got this service a lot of people use now called Zoom to have meetings at home. And so, when somebody proposes a service like that, there are all sorts of technical challenges that come up. They don't run to government for the answers. They start 10 different other little companies to solve these technical challenges. And then what those people discover become separate multi-million, sometimes worth more than $100 million all on their own. So every challenge in the private sector is an opportunity to establish a new business. And these days, just for regular folks like us, Pat, it's an opportunity to establish a national or a global business. When I first started out in the 80s, I thought locally. I started a local ad agency that catered to clients who weren't big enough to have a big ad agency, people in Vermont, New Hampshire, right? And then when the internet came along, I instantly began thinking nationally. When my son started his first business, he immediately was thinking internationally, and he was working with his video game partner in Beijing to manufacture parts for the Xbox game kit he invented. The government doesn't look at the world that way. It's a very outcome-oriented world. It's very narrowly, outcomes are narrowly defined by people who are not creative people who have not worked in the private sector, people who are born into families who are also very outcome oriented, and they know that if they raise their children to go to a certain college and they get a job with the federal or state government, that they're going to have good dental, they're not going to get laid off, and everything is going to be just fine. But those of us in the private sector are not satisfied with lives that are just fine. We're continually striving for lives that are outstanding and filled with purpose, and that's why I am running for president, is to help save the sandbox that the United States is. The First Amendment has created this enormous sandbox with 300 million people in it, and we need to be free to jump into that sandbox and get out our Tonka toys and experiment with building and failing and building and failing and building and failing. And it's never perfect. I always say tomorrow is an opportunity to fail better. You fail better tomorrow, but it's never perfect.
Folks, if you're just joining us, Mark Whitney is joining us. He is the candidate for the Libertarian Party presidential nomination. He's on the line from his own secret facility, I believe, in California. We've had some fun, but we've been talking a lot about the markets and the relationship to free enterprise in a country post-corona, post-COVID, and what's possible that. If you're just joining us for the first time, we are also the Coalition, Outrage, Porn Free, Civilly Disobedient Media at coalitionradionetwork.com. We will be taking calls at some point after he's on, or if I'll give him the opportunity. It's a new tech for us, but 401-205-3738 if you'd like to line up and maybe ask calls. Mark, are you okay with taking a couple calls if folks if we can work that out?
Yeah, sure. Let me just raise a market related question for you, just to get your thoughts. Because you mentioned this bunker. So my studio where I'm in, I have about a 700 square foot office here in an office complex. I happen to be right across the road from the headquarters of Qualcomm, which employs about 50,000 people. Now, government aside, right? If you're Qualcomm and you know that this virus is going on, you have tremendous liability problems that you have to concern yourself with if you're allowing workers, 40 to 50,000 workers, to come in and sit in cubes that are 6 feet square and be working. So there's an example where I don't think Qualcomm needs the government to tell them not to have people to come to work during this virus. I don't think their insurance companies would allow them to have people come to work.
Right. Yeah, and you've struck a nerve in terms of the free markets. There is within relationships within businesses. There are their own checks and balances, if you will. And if nothing else, the constant presence of the government has really increased the leverage of the insurance industry within all markets, whether it be construction, financial, any type of trade. This overwhelming nanny state that we live in has, if you will, shifted the load and created, I believe, unfair opportunities for insurance companies to play more of a dominant role in a marketplace relationship than they should. But ultimately, the fundamental need to profit is what's at stake in a free market system. That sounds simplistic, right?
Yeah.
Well, but right now we have a debate in America between the relationship of the owners, if you will, and their ability to profit. Folks look to, and particularly government, looks towards this relationship with owners of businesses, that they've got an accountability to society that simply does not exist. If a business should choose to be civically minded because it's either for them an altruistic goal, or they sense it as an advantage to their business, then they have the right to do so. But in no way, shape, or form is business, which is an amalgamation of people, interests, technologies, innovations, at all responsible to anyone but the owners / the shareholders. Now, what's always
Right.
interesting to me is when unions, public unions in particular, claim this ability to control and the issue about fairness. Well, and they look to disparage the notion of the
fairness.
corporate.
Fairness is a very ambiguous term and used
Fair,
for a lot of devious reasons.
Right. The word fair, I believe, is a 4-letter obscenity. So I'll take it even one step further. What folks in that world fail to realize, because they are inoculated from any real world risk whatsoever, is that who are the single biggest owners of most of these corporations that they demonize on a daily basis? Well, it's pension funds. And typically, it's defined benefit funds, which are typically either public sector union or a handful of large corporations. So in fact, realistically, they have the ability to control these behaviors because they are the ultimate owners. They choose not to do so because it would impact their ability to deliver a pension. But they're quite willing at any time to transfer that risk back to the corporation if it benefits them, and if all of a sudden this notion that companies are accountable to anybody but their stockholders benefits them. It's a one-way relationship. It ultimately alters and really minimizes or eliminates the opportunity for the free market controls to take themselves. And so government continues to take different methods to leverage their presence in that marketplace. And that's one of the, I believe, through public employee unions as such, that's one of the ways they do so. Because all of a sudden now, companies right now in the midst of this crisis are being judged on how altruistic they are. That's not their job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's true.
I mean, shouldn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, there are so many things to unpack there. But I mean, the bottom line is that, in the private sector, there are so many checks and balances, by private contracts, like you said, defined benefits, pension plans that are invested in doing things in relation to big companies, but also the private sector insurance contracts. When something happens that can't be measured with a fair amount of predictability by actuaries, everything changes in the private sector without government being involved. Private sector insurance companies, and I hate paying these premiums. I wish I could write one insurance check and cover all the various liabilities in my life. That's not how the world is set up right now, because they choose to partner up with government and rig the game. But in a true free market, we probably could write one check to one insurance company, and all the liabilities in our lives would be covered. But insurance does so much regulate our ability to engage in commerce. This little 700 square foot space I rent here, I have to pay, $1,200 or $1,300 a year in insurance that I have to pay the premium so that my landlord is protected from any liability that may be incurred by me having people coming in and out of my studio, or any liability may be incurred for me running for president. But these are the things you and I are talking about right now. This is not common knowledge. This is not things that takes up. It's very hard to get mind share. It's hard to get into people's skulls when the messaging that is coming from the people that are meant to be holding our government accountable. And by that I mean the New York Times, the Amazon Post, the major cable channels, the people who dominate the mind share of people in our nation. They are meant to be the guardians. They're meant to be looking out for us, and they're not looking out for us. I have an impression that I do of Wolf Blitzer. If you'd like me to do it for you, it's a very simple impression. This is my impression of Wolf Blitzer responding to anybody and responding to anything anybody says on one of his panels or in any interview. My impression of Wolf Blitzer. Here we go. Yes, that is scary indeed. That's my impression of Wolf Blitzer. That's all he says for the last 30 years. Yes, that is scary indeed. So their job, literally, and they have analytics now that teach them. They know that when they sell fear, they sell more advertising, and that's not been a good thing. It's not good that the people who are there to help keep the government accountable have analytics to tell them what makes our blood pressure go up and down. I wish that wasn't the case.
Well, that's when we define the term outrage porn at the introduction of every one of our shows.
Exactly. It's all because of analytics. You know?
We are outrage porn free, which means we're not interested in having conversations about issues that are purely either symbolic of or driven by emotions. Emotions are, in a sense, an opportunity for big media and government to change the subject. We get back as libertarians constantly to the same series of central arguments. We have to be repetitious because everybody in that sphere really is not interested whatsoever in having a conversation about government mission creep. They're not interested in having a conversation.
The challenge always is how to, and this is something I do at a pretty high level when I'm not boxed into this character of running for president. The challenge is to make principle-oriented arguments exciting. I think John Oliver does a pretty good job at that. I think Stephen Colbert sometimes does a good job at it. I think Bill Maher sometimes does a good job at it. I think Nick Gillespie at Reason is a guy who can be very interesting. Satire and mockery and storytelling, these are the things that really bring people in. And one of the challenges now, not being able to go out, as somebody who got into this race late and not being able to go out and meet people and shake hands and make that human connection, it's only possible in the room. That definitely, I think makes it more difficult because that's a big advantage that I have when I can do that. And but all we can do is the best we can, right?
Right. One of the challenges faced in recent years by libertarian presidential tickets has been the interaction with down ballot candidates.
Right.
I get the sense with the current crop of candidates that in a world that was virus free, that every one of them would be thrilled to do nothing less than spend an afternoon on Main Street America somewhere, in a parade, doing door knocking, all that. I get that very real sense. Do you have any creative ideas how we can bolster our down ballot candidates in what is clearly a year that we're going to have to reinvent campaigning?
Well, I think the best thing we can do is cross promote each other. I have offered to, reach out and endorse people who are taking a serious run at becoming members of the federal legislature and becoming governors. There's a guy down in Kentucky named Brad Barron who's trying to, take on Mitch McConnell. I donated his campaign. I got to make an endorsement video for him at some point. He's a great guy. There are some really good libertarians out there. And I think they might be smarter than I am, most of them, because one of the downsides I've come to realize running for president of the Libertarian Party is I spend a lot of my time trying to distinguish myself from my libertarian opponents, and we agree on 95% of the stuff. When you're running as a libertarian, and those of you listening here who have been thinking about running for office, and you're not down with the Democrats or Republicans, when you're running as a libertarian for the House of Representatives, for the U.S. Senate, as a governor, lieutenant governor, or city council in your big city, most of the time you're running unopposed. So you can take it right to the Democrats or Republicans. And the conflict between a libertarian and an authoritarian is very great. Or sometimes I feel like I'm dancing on the head of a pin, to distinguish myself against some of my libertarian opponents where we're very principle oriented. And and we agree, war on drugs, end it. War on terror, end it. War on trade, end it. We all agree on that. Don't spend money you don't have. We all agree on that. We all agree on these fundamental things as a matter of principle.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up. That's a great point. One of the rewards and one of the if you will, the advantages of being a libertarian candidate is that we actually have a philosophy that we can look at an issue through the prism of. And in a sense, it makes it very easy to have that conversation. We've got a young man, Bill Hunt, who's run for state rep now, and he's been able to get in the 30 to 40% range of the votes one-on-one with very established, well-financed Democrats. And folks often remark that when they ask him a question, he answers it very, very, and he doesn't have to think about it. Huh? He doesn't have to do an opinion poll. He's not doing any market research. Right. He doesn't have anybody whispering into the headset. He just simply thinks
Correct.
about his libertarian perspective and answers it. But that also brings up a critical point. As someone who's been involved in sales, starting businesses, one of the key issues for libertarians in running, especially at the state and local level, and we cover this on a new weekly show on LPTV called An Hour with the Candidates. What tips do you have, or how important is it for local candidates to focus on local issues, that not to try and convert people to be libertarians, but simply to deal with lunch pail issues to get them to vote for them? How important is that?
Yeah, I think if you're running for the federal legislature, if you're running for governor, something like that, the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and those principles play a big role. But I think if you're running for city council in Providence or San Diego, where I am, it's less important. I think, in fact, here in California, we don't have partisan races. In the state primaries, the top two vote getters run against each other. It's typically two Democrats, because it's a pretty big Democratic state. But those things all depend on, like, the highest elected libertarian official that we have is this guy named Jeff Hewitt. He's a county supervisor out here in Riverside County. He presides over a multi-billion-dollar budget. It's the sixth largest budget, I think, of any county in the country. I think he shares his seat with 4 other committee members. But the word libertarian didn't appear on the ballot. He is libertarian. He brings his libertarian economic sensibilities to the job. But in his position, they're not having, when you're running for office in that position, you're not having, big conversations about the importance of free speech or search and seizure necessarily. It's more about economics and what's going on, in your county and the various political subdivisions that you preside over in your county. So, if you understand your local issues and you're looking to get on the ballot and make an impact, running as a libertarian, if you have to choose a party, can be helpful. If you don't have to choose a party, the Libertarian Party platform and just hanging out with libertarians can reinforce in a positive way, depending on the libertarians you're hanging out with, can reinforce in a positive way some of the approaches that you would take. And there is sort of a boot camp built into the party that helps people be better candidates.
Yeah, Kara Schultz and that entire crew do astonishing at work at taking a lot of great raw material. I mean, these people are sharp. What we don't have is the critical mass. So here in San Diego, 15 years ago, I opened a comedy club because San Diego is a dead comedy town. We had the Mohair Comedy Store. You could get 3 minutes there on a Sunday night at an open mic. And if you wanted to get better, there's no place. So I opened a warehouse. I set up a stage at 100 chairs. I produced 500 free shows for the community over a few years. I called it San Diego Comedy Co-op. And what happened was the comedians in town learned that they did not need permission to do comedy. So now, because I did the Comedy Co-op, San Diego is a legit comedy town. The comics who worked out at the Comedy Co-op, which is just a warehouse, a couple of them went out and opened legit comedy clubs. But back in Vermont, my home state of Vermont, where I grew up, I was born in Rhode Island, they have something called the Vermont Comedy Club. It's a website, because they don't have the critical. In San Diego, we're like the 7th largest city in the country, and we have maybe 5 great stand-up comics in the country. So my analogy I make for the Libertarian Party is we don't have the critical mass to have, say, a dozen awesome candidates that will just own the room every time they take the stage. You need to have a critical mass to be able to mine that kind of talent. And that's something that I'm hoping to change over the next few years as a libertarian, because coming from the world of stand-up comedy, coming from the world of radio and TV, the world of conducting seminars throughout corporate America, the world of touring independent theaters throughout North America and the UK, I am personally aware of how one person can just completely raise the temperature of a room within about 10 seconds of taking the stage. My stand-up show, Pat, if I go into an open mic where nobody knows who I am, I just come out and I go, what do we got, Democrats or Christians? And that wakes them right up, That wakes them up.
They know what we're in. They're like, oh, that's how it's going to be. Yeah, and I'm like, that's how it's going to be, because it's a very adversarial situation, and the attitude is like, okay, come on, asshole, make me laugh. It's like, I'll make you laugh. I'll make you laugh. So you kill or be killed. Politics is the same game. You kill or be killed, and but you need to have the critical mass to do it. And the Libertarian Party doesn't have that. But I believe with these tools, like what you and I are using now, the efficient distribution we have over these platforms now to produce good video and audio and stuff like that, and talk to each other, I think the future is bright when we're not otherwise plagued by a killer virus.
Right. Well, like I said, I'm I'm optimistic because to a certain degree, when someone like yourself and we've got some great candidates running for the presidency are up there, right, and all of a sudden you put them in a split screen with Joe Biden or Donald Trump, it's if we get to that point, that's so important. If we get to that point where we get that split screen, then all of a sudden it's going to be a slaughter, because
it's too easy. It's too easy to become a president as a Democrat or Republican because you're never challenged. The media never challenges you. So whenever a Libertarian has the opportunity to get on stage against a Democrat and a Republican in a three-way competition, that's a great opportunity because the Libertarian is going to challenge them. Donald Trump has no understanding of the basics of what it means to be a citizen in the United States. And Joe Biden has just become completely institutionalized by being part of this corrupt system for so long that the contrast would be stark were I to be on the stage with these two guys, and it would cause people to sit up and take notice for sure.
Right, because you ultimately, we have to take, how can I say this? The beauty of our ideas are not going to be enough to impress and shake the average person out of the sort of stupor they find themselves politically. It's not that simple. It's force of personality and a willingness to be the aggressor in all situations.
Exactly.
I had the opportunity on a hyper-local level. I mean, there's no comparison, but I did a panel show with the head of the Republican and the Democratic parties in our state. Great. I embrace it. From the minute I was on that panel, I did everything I could to control the conversation. I really wasn't interested in being fair. I asked them to agree to terms on my terms, and I wasn't interested in being polite. I was polite. I was professional, but at the same time, who's going to be the aggressor? It's clear from your attitude that you're used to being the aggressor. You're used to being the aggressor.
Yeah, I always on the attack. That has actually hurt me in some ways, I think, in this campaign. That my understanding of a political contest is that it's a debate, and you kill or you be killed. That's what it is. And so I'm actually a much better general election candidate than I am a primary candidate. The thing is, if you're running as a Libertarian for the federal legislature or a governorship, the beauty of it is you don't have to be a good politician. It actually benefits you to not be a good politician, to actually just be on the attack and be talking about the basics that we know everybody believes. It's just that a lot of citizens have forgotten that they believe these things, and the opportunity of a Libertarian who could stand there and speak with confidence about some of the fundamental principles that uphold our society and have worked, the ability for that person to do that and be on be on offense at all times is unfettered, because you don't have to go through a primary system and engage in the pretense of being friends with. I'm friends with my opponents, but I would rather just be running against Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because that is the problem, And I wish that the libertarian system was set up to give us, like from January to November to do that. Because it takes time. It takes time.
Well, I'm going to make a suggestion, something I thought about, and it's not in relation to you per se, but to all the presidential candidates. Given the situation, given the fact that, and God bless you all for engaging in this endless series of debates. God bless all of you for your willingness to go out and support individual affiliates by appearing in so many of their conventions. It's beyond laudable. It's heroic. I'm not sure folks truly understand the financial commitment, the time away from family, the time away from your primary occupation, that it means to be a libertarian candidate on a national level. And there's only a handful of people who understand that. The people who are running for the presidency and the handful of people who are running, I believe, heroic campaigns across the country for national positions on the Libertarian National Committee. I think it's time, quite frankly, for all of you. We all know you intimately at this point. You know, you're like family to us. We know the good, the bad, the ugly, for all of you. I think it's time for libertarian candidates to sort of, remember Big Mo from the battleship from World War II, to start to turn those cannons, all right? And rather than take shots at our fellow libertarians, to really aim them at Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because their sins are so egregious, and there's this pent-up energy, and there's a talent level within the Libertarian Party. Let's start taking them on. Hell.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. I am not I'm not spending any time anymore trying to distinguish myself, say, between me and Jacob Hornberger, because if Jacob Hornberger and I were to sit down at dinner, we'd agree on 95% of the stuff. And I kind of joked. I was kind of making a joke with my wife that what we ought to do is rent a warehouse here in San Diego like we did for our comedy convention, and bring all the libertarian candidates in here, and we would just live in the warehouse during the week. And then on the weekends, we would come out and take the stage and call each other names as people would come in and watch. And then we'd go back to sitting around in wife beaters and playing poker and dominoes and drinking warm Genesee from a quart bottle the rest of the week, until the next weekend another set of delegates come in. And, I thought that, and then we'd all sleep in hammocks and stuff like that. We put up a sheet so Joe Jorgensen could have some privacy. Otherwise, we'd just all walk around in our underwear. I thought that might be a better model with the coronavirus. But your point is well taken about who the enemy is, where the evil is. I've been doing a live show every day, and I've been kind of disappointed with it, because I feel like doing a live show every day and the frequency of it, I feel like I'm telling stories that are about 10% as good as what I'm capable of doing. So beginning Thursday, April 24th, I'm going to be doing a weekly show called Libertarian Lens, and it's going to be highly produced. It's going to be on the caliber of what you see from what John Oliver is doing, and it's going to have network quality production value. I'll do pieces in the field and in the studio, and I'm really excited about it. And I think that the market is ripe for something like this. That's really excellent. We have a lot of people now who are using Zoom to do live programming. Like, anybody can click a button on Facebook now and go live. So there's just a dearth of crap out there, and I don't want to be one of those guys. So I'm going to go back to doing a pre-recorded show and use all of my multimedia skills to produce that, storytelling skills, and of course I'm still running for president, but I can multitask, and I'll just wait for kind of the dust to settle and see if we're having a convention or whatever. But it's all going to be focused on, the show's all going to be focused on the rogue actions and inactions of our government. But the audience is not going to, I'm not targeting libertarians with this program. I'm targeting the citizenry. And because these things that we talk about, that you and I are talking about here tonight, Pat, these are fundamental principles, and people agree with us. So if it's put forth in a nonpartisan way with a lot of humor and a lot of intelligence, I think it's something that'll catch on and be really successful.
No, I agree with you. It's time to stop looking inward. It's time to stop having, I would love to have a moratorium between now and November 3rd or 4th or whatever it is, a moratorium on everything from, if you will, to renters theft, to who do you like better, Mises or fill in the blanks, any of that.
By the way, this Mises guy, did Mises ever get one customer ever? Did he ever get a customer? Or did he just sit around and think all the time? Did Mises ever close a deal? That's what I want to know. Did he ever start a software company or anything, or do anything? Did he ever sell anything, Mises?
I'm thinking Mises on a roadshow doing the pre-roadshow for a company doing an IPO. That would be fascinating. But but it's time to look outward. We've got this opportunity every 4 years where events dictate that we do our best to go on a national stage.
Right.
We need to be aggressive.
Basically, we run a very highly orchestrated publicity stunt. I mean, there's a non-zero chance I'm going to be the president, right? But it's an opportunity to have a bunch of money come in. And my sales pitch has been that, if I'm the nominee, I can go on Kimmel and do 5 minutes of killer stand-up, and the other late night shows are going to see me. I know a lot of these writers in these writing rooms at these places, and I could do all these shows and maybe host Saturday Night Live and use that as a way to connect with people. Right now, they're doing the Tonight Show on Zoom out of Jimmy Fallon's basement. So some of my vision of how I was going to pull this off right now, it's all very murky. And but I'm very enthusiastic about being in the position I'm in. I turn 61 in another couple of weeks, and I'm lucky that I mostly just feel grateful every day. I wake up. I'm grateful that I am not somebody who has to decide whether I'm going to have to take a $17 an hour job because Walmart's paying a couple extra dollars now and go work in a warehouse and risk getting a virus. I'm an introvert, actually. I'm very much of an introvert. I'm very comfortable being isolated and just monkeying around with my ideas. That's how I spend most of my life. I really light up when the lights come on and the mic comes on. I love being on stage and talking to audiences. But I'm mostly just grateful that my wife and my sons and I are in the position we are to be able to help out, that our business is done over the internet, and we don't have, there's so much pain out there right now and more to come. I feel almost an obligation to do what I can to use my life story. My life is defined as one that has found the opportunity in some very adverse situations. And
Absolutely.
so adversity doesn't scare me. I'm just hardwired to look for the opportunity. I told a story on my show yesterday about how 30 years ago when I was at Allenwood Federal Prison Camp, literally the highlight of the week was Friday night when I would sit around a wastebasket with my friends Lonnie from D.C. and Derek from Baltimore, a couple of young African-American guys who got caught up in the war on drugs. And we'd sit around this wastebasket and we would rotate the cell every Friday. We'd go to a different cell for the variety, but we get a wastebasket. We get our hands on a clean wastebasket liner, and we'd take some Doritos and some green olives and some tuna and some Cheese Whiz and put it in this wastebasket liner and crunch it all up and then dip saltines in there and just sit around and tell jokes for an hour. And it was the highlight of the week. And we did have one rule, though, that they imposed on me, and that was no time jokes, because they were serving so much time for dealing a little bit of cocaine compared to what I did lying to the bank that I was not allowed to make any time jokes. But my point being that one of the things I learned in that situation when I went through the situation with the federal government 30 years ago is that if you give people 90 days to adjust to a new situation, if you can just take 90 days and just be patient with yourself, you're going to find the opportunity in the situation. Most people will find the opportunity. It's an opportunity to get in better shape. It's an opportunity to change your diet. It's an opportunity to get started on that book you're always going to write. It's an opportunity to keep a journal. It's an opportunity to A/B test your entrepreneurial skills on your neighbors. Without registering with the state, just go out there and see if you can make some rain for yourself. An opportunity maybe to teach your 12 or 13-year-old maybe how to start a little business, start mowing some lawns or whatever. It's just an opportunity to start behaving differently because you don't have a choice, and you're going to learn new things about yourself that you didn't know that may end up leading to some very positive things in your life. What we are now calling the new normal.
No, I listen. I agree with you 100%. Very much what we've done here in the last 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago, this didn't exist. Is been a reflection, if you will. You and I are a similar age. That there aren't many opportunities in life to sort of reinvent yourself, and usually it's circumstances that force the issue. I used to work in tech, and I was a computer contractor until September 12th, 2001. September 18th or so, I was selling trucks. Life happens, and so
Yeah.
There's a couple of great memes out there. They're kind of rough in the sense of, they're a little judgmental, but they point out accurately that if you've got a month or two of your life and you're in a position where, and again, my heart breaks for folks who find themselves, the guy who was the Uber driver, who now literally, if he can get a fare, has to worry about whether or not that guy coming in is going to get him sick. The folks who are working as CNAs,
That's what I'm saying.
right? Because the federal government says such high regulations and high cost of doing business that CNAs are making $13 an hour despite literally immersing themselves in the most marginalized lives and immersing themselves in literally healthcare hell. There are a lot of us who aren't in that position. So take the time, and particularly if you're a libertarian, take the time to tune up your act. Find a way that you can prepare yourself for when the veil is lifted, and it will be, that you can come out raging.
Right.
Come out of fighting.
And also, if you're somebody who's gotten caught short here, because you don't have enough money saved up, or maybe what is it that you can do in the future to make sure you don't get caught short again? Are there things that you personally can do? That's really the challenge. This is an opportunity for everyone to stop and think of ways that they can reinvent themselves a little bit or completely, depending on their lot in life. My wife was pointing out today that one of the things that defines this time we're going through is that there are no celebrations going on. There are no graduations, no proms, no Easter, no Yankees games, no Red Sox, no celebrations. It's kind of a celebrationless time. The oxygen is defined by how many people died yesterday, and so forth, and that's psychologically not very helpful. And it really does play into the hands of government, who are really kind of ghoulish when it comes to this stuff. And I do feel on a daily basis the increase. On a daily basis, it seems exponential each day. The more I feel like we're in this for the long haul. My youngest son made an analogy that it feels like you're at the airport and they tell you the plane's going to be 15 minutes late, and then a half an hour goes by and they tell you it's going to be an hour, and then an hour and a half goes by and they tell you it's a gate change. Then you go to the gate, and then another hour they tell you the plane broke, and another hour they tell you there's not going to be a flight. That's kind of how it feels like we're all kind of waiting at the gate right now to me.
If you remember high school English, we're all sort of in a waiting for Godot moment. But it's important. It's important, and I say this to my libertarian friends, my brothers and sisters. Don't put life on hold right now, because it seems like there's so much in question. There's so many answers that we're still waiting on. Something as in the real world as innocuous as how are we going to do a convention, to how as a nation are we going to track people to whether or not they've been ill or not, and how incredibly grotesque that notion is for a failed government like we have today that would presume that they have that power. There are things that you can do right now to change the world. And
yes, that's why I was challenging people. I was saying to the people the other day, maybe it's better for us all to assume that we're going to be in this situation for a year, right? Like if we knew definitively that it was going to be like this for the next year, we would all be taking steps tomorrow to improve our lot in life. So I said, why don't you just assume starting right now that this is how it's going to be for the next year, and then tomorrow, decide that you're going to start some little business, some little service, figure out a way to generate revenue if you're among the 80% of the people that need to do that, and design a way to be productive and successful within this narrow framework. Try to find a way to do that just by pretending that we know this is how it's going to be for the next year. Let's just assume that. And then if it's not that, then fantastic. But at least you would then be the first mover. You would be the one who benefits most when the veil is lifted.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've covered pretty much the world's problems at this point.
I think we've solved them all. I think we've solved them all. And my wife is waiting for me to head home to dinner. So It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Pat. I'm available to talk anytime you want. I appreciate the effort you're putting in.
Give us your contact information so that folks can reach out to you on the web.
Yeah, it's markwhitney.com, markwhitney.com, Mark with a K. I spell it the right way. markwhitney.com. And most of the drama in my campaigns, such as campaigns are right now, plays out on Facebook. And then a couple of weeks, I'm going to debut a program called Libertarian Lens. I have had success with independent productions, both live in the theater with my memoir, Fool for a Client. If you haven't watched Fool for a Client, it's an award-winning stage show. I toured for many years. It's available for free. markwhitney.com. Just click on memoir. You don't have to give me your email address or anything. Just get out some popcorn and Kleenex and watch it. It's about that one time I represented myself against the federal government facing 225 years in federal prison. Obviously, it didn't go the way they wanted because here I am.
Well, and here you are. Well, listen, folks, our guest is going to sign off. Excuse me. We're going to stay on the air for a couple of hours or an hour or however it takes. If folks who we have
You're
sort
like
of
Alex Jones. What are you doing? 6 or 8 hours a day or something, right?
Listen, if the voice could hold up, I would do even more.
It's gonna be great.
I need a couple cigars here, right? So if you just want to thank Mark for joining us. The lines are going to stay open at 401-205-3738. We are, I believe, the Libertarian Party's first overnight talk radio station here. We're using new technology to do it. Give us a call if there's anything you would all want to discuss. But again, I want to thank Mark Whitney for joining us. He will be joining us again in the future. Listen, these lines are open to candidates. It could be down ballot. It could be, top of the ticket type of stuff. Regardless of what your involvement is, this is an open mic. Think of this as a 24-hour open mic for libertarians to vent, to speechify, have a few laughs, shed a few tears. Regardless of what happens with the convention, that's why we're here. Yeah. And we'll have the normies on too, and we even have a few socialists and commies on joining us. But ultimately, the point is we're here. Mark, are you still with us? Why don't you give us a goodbye? But if there was one, close on this note, if you would, if you humor me, if there was one, 2 or 3 lines that you wanted to say to libertarians everywhere right now, given everything that's happening, what would you say to encourage people?
Okay, look into the camera. Listen to me closely here. If I am your nominee for president, and if I become president of the United States, every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, I don't care if Florida is underwater, if there are bodies in the street, if there are missiles inbound to Cleveland, every Saturday at 8 o'clock, I, Mark Whitney, as president, am going to walk out to the front of the White House. I'm going to step out to the microphone, and I'm going to deliver Joke of the Week. What more could you possibly want?
God bless America.
There you go.
Good night, Mark. There. We are the coalition.
Man. Thanks a
lot. Loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at the Coalition Radio Network home in the bunker in the hills above Providence looking down. Facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We're going to take about a 20-second break, and then it's going to be all about you. So call in at 401-205-3738. If you're one of the normies, that's cool. If you're a hardcore libertarian, that's cool. Anything you want to argue about, anything you want to vent about. If you we posted up today a white paper presented by the American Civil Liberties Union, which talks extensively about freedom and issues surrounding cell phone tracking. I would commend that to your attention. We're going to be posting up a couple of shows we had over the last few days from the Goldwater Institute, where we talk about specific issues in the run-up to Corona that were employed by the government ostensibly to control markets, but which ultimately exacerbated this situation to the nth degree and probably cost people their lives. We talk about things like that. We've had folks on in the last week or so extensively to talk about the decriminalization of sex work. This show routinely covers sex work issues, because hashtag sex work is real work. And whether it be the adaptation, if you will, to the new reality in the electronic market, thanks to the laws of FOSTA and SESTA by an overreaching federal government, which has served to do nothing less than put the lives of sex workers at harm and create great, tremendous risk, or whether it be some of the more innovative marketing techniques that they're using. We had Jessie Sage on the other night, and she's been with us a couple of times, and she really represents the cutting edge, if you will, of adult entertainment. Very libertarian. I'm not sure if he realizes that yet. We haven't had that conversation yet. I will. But someone who's a producer, self-promoter, writes, talks, acts. And that's a model really for literally every marketplace, not just adult entertainment. The folks in that community have largely taken their fortunes in their own hand and exist in a world outside of government and exist in a world outside of market controls, exist in almost a near perfect world in one sense, that they've got a product that they deliver to the customer in very much a free market method. Those are the kind of third rail issues that we handle here at the Coalition Radio. Earlier today, you'll see the post up. I had a state senator from Rhode Island, avowed progressive Democrat, as progressive as it gets. Listen to that for a little while if you want to hear exactly what his thought process is and how government should react. Now, what's fascinating about progressives that some of the end goals that progressives and libertarians have, they share. We get there in very, very different ways, but we share some of the same end goals. And if you'd like to discuss that, we'd be happy to. But we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media. Taking a quick break right now. Thank you. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live. Jesus, I did it again. At the Coalition Radio Network. I had the good fortune to be with the Go Local people, broadcasting, in a sense, independent production, using their studios for a couple of years. Old habits die hard. But we are at the Banca, a hidden facility high in the hills above the great city of Providence, Rhode Island. The state of Rhode Island, known as the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, technically. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, coalitionradio.us. So if you listen to this, we'll be on for a little while. We had some great guests on tonight. Mike was on earlier tonight talking about his M&L landscaping. Wonderful stuff. He is what you would call a pillar of the community. An individual who is actively engaged in business, actively engaged in the community, raising a family, owning a home. If you will, the American dream. Tortured somewhat, of course, by an out-of-control, expensive government that seems to be directed like a laser at small business. Challenging times, clearly, and that's the understatement. But here's a guy who is ready to do work and is working in the middle of this. gets up every day, doesn't mail it in, doesn't check a box. Now, not everyone is in a position to do that. I get that. There are a lot of folks in, here in Rhode Island. As I said, we've got a huge reliance, if we will, on travel and hospitality. If we've got a lot of accomplished restaurant folk who are out of work, who simply can't just show up and work in a restaurant. They've been shut down largely. And despite the ability for some to do takeout, that's not a model that works for everyone. It just isn't. I wouldn't presume to know which would. That's up to the individual entrepreneur, but it's not a model that works for everyone. So not everyone can do that. But we want to celebrate here at the Coalition those that can. And for those that can, we need to make sure that they do. And we do that by simply thinking of them in our day-to-day lives. If there is work available and you're in a position to help support that. And again, not everyone is. There are an awful lot of people who are literally living on that thin line. I know what that feeling is like personally. But should you be in a position to support the Mike Underwoods of the world, local businesses, whose efforts not only do they not end at your doorstep, but they reach far throughout the community. You heard very provocative stuff on when you stop to think about it. Mike's business supports a firm that does professionally, does blades and does work on lawnmowers. Mike's business supports a local firm that does mulch. Mike's business supports a somewhat local firm that does pesticides and things like that. Mike's firm supports an individual with his workers who does irrigation. The shoots, the green shoots, if you will, the tendrils of Mike's business blow throughout the economy here on a very local basis. Unimaginable impact, both financially and spiritually. And when I say spiritually, I mean if you're a small business and you're used to being busy and you've got some people working for you and maybe you had to cut their hours, you're hurting. If you haven't owned a business, and it's difficult to explain, and that's not to be, again, judgmental. Owning a business isn't for everyone. But if you've owned a business, you know that pain. And you're sitting there and you're trying to figure out how to keep it going. And someone walks through the door and engages in a simple act of commerce. They buy some stuff. They write you a check. In Rhode Island, they say, well, you break out the scuttle. They do that. That changes your outlook. Sometimes on life. Because you're still making that connection. If you're a business owner, every transaction is a moment to celebrate. A concept we probably, a lot of us have lost touch with over the last couple of 3 years when everything has been so easy. Now it's not. Everything is very, very difficult. So you need to celebrate that moment. And we need to celebrate the people who find themselves in a position where they can still do that. And again, that's the Mike Underwoods of the world. For every business out there that's got an innovative solution. We had last week on folks from Ritual Sweat Society on Thayer Street in Providence. They came up with an innovative way to keep the business moving. That's something we should be celebrating. If you're fortunate enough to be a customer of theirs, keep on keeping on. Why not take a moment to try something new out? Rhode Islanders all over the state grew up with Yacht Club soda. Why not take a moment to, if you haven't had one in a few years, call John. Go on their website, yachtclubsoda.com. Place an order. There's going to be an awful lot of homesteading, if you will. So order a case of root beer. Feel like a kid again. Get it delivered. make a root beer float with one of the Great Rhode Island ice cream companies. There is so much here to be celebrated in this state. Maybe this is the event that pushes us to our origins, to our upbringing. Maybe we start to look back to those institutions in the state and celebrate them. Let's minimize what I call the eulogies. 6 months from now, let's not have a conversation about so-and-so's business. It was so great they used to be here. Terrible that they closed. By that one simple act, you can make that change. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. But what are your thoughts? 401-205-3738. Be the first on your block to call. Give us a shout, vent, scream, yell. You name it. Again, take a moment, if you will, to go to coalitionradio.us. I'm going to do it right now. Click on the link called Civil Liberty News. There is a plethora, if you will, of information out there from a variety of subgroups within the American Civil Liberties Union. Give a click on You Need to Join the ACLU. Stephen Brown joined the coalition. Lord, it's got to be 6-7 years ago. And we had a conversation about the importance of the ACLU, its history. I think we're about to relearn its importance. Tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, Orleans City, New York Libertarian Chair, candidate, activist Chase Catch. Still working on that, folks. Sorry. That's spelled Tkach. Interesting young lady in the quiet confines of upstate New York has brought the battle for liberty to the streets, if you will. Very much her own lifestyle. When you meet her, you'll understand what I mean about body autonomy, self-ownership, personal rights and liberties. You'll get it completely. Here is an individual who answers to no one. So we celebrate her joining us. Friday night, we're going to have Paul Roselli. Paul is a local environmentalist of quite some known, the executive director of the Burrillville Land Trust. He'll be talking about, I'm not sure. He has to come on. He's got a few things he wants to develop. I hope folks will join him. At 8 o'clock or so, we're going to be on LPTV, an hour with the candidates, and we're working on some more content for tomorrow. We've got a recording up of Sam Bell. He, of Progressive Democrat fame, he joined us this morning at about 9 or so and went into some quite detail. Exactly, I should say, commenting on a variety of state institutions that, And we've also got up on the page our conversation with Jesse Sage. Here is a woman in control of her environment. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Is there anybody out there? One of the things we're trying to do after a guest was on, and we were blessed to have a number of folks watching, listening. Watching, is that a word? Listening. We've gotten some new followers if you will, on the coalition. Let's see who's joined us. Chuckles the Clown. He follows me. I love social media. I actually know Chuckles, great guy. Does a lot of stuff for kids. He's got this sort of horror clown thing going on. Brilliant stuff. That's what's going on the Twitter. We are on the Twitter in two places. We are on the Mighty Mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio, and we are POTaxpayer. That's my individual account. PO being either pissed off or poor. Depending on the day. Just moving across social media right now. We've got 3 new followers today on the Facebook. It's so important for indie media, particularly one that supports guests in a studio environment. To have success on that. Read some reactions here. Glenn Marshall. We have to wrestle back control of the narrative. The MSM, as in mainstream media, government, have put themselves in place as the arbiter of everyday life for all Americans. Great point. Carl Krambeck. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I believe that's a quote from Animal Farm. Did I get that right? The sound effects are great. Thanks, Joel. Thanks, Thomas Gamble. Some commentary on tonight's visit from Mark Whitney. It always confuses me on the Facebook when they talk about how many comments there are. They'll say 7, I see 4. Boy. Earlier today, I posted, was it today? It seems so long ago. Oh, I'm sorry, yesterday. We did a post about Mia Ackerman, who's a state representative based here in Cumberland, Rhode Island. She thinks, as a state rep, that she has the ability to block people on social media. What do you say? Have you been blocked by somebody? Have you been blocked by a government official? 401-205-3738. State rep, there is actual case law that makes that illegal. They may like to pretend that it's not, but it is in fact illegal. A lot of state reps seem to think that they've got this incredible power. Come on the show. Again, tomorrow evening. Chase Thatch. So, folks, if you're out there and there's an issue that you'd like to discuss, let us know. We've got a running, scrolling feed on the Facebook at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. So I believe we're going to shut it down early tonight. We will be back here in the morning. We've been on and off the air since about 9 o'clock this morning. So I think we're going to have our good night moment. So take a look at all the videos. If you hear this, take a look at everything done today. An incredible spectrum of guests. And on that note, I say we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live from the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We are listener supported. We are on Patreon. There is a link at coalitionradionetwork.com. We are supported by donations and individual sponsorships. If you have a business that you'd like to sponsor a show, we've got some incredible pre-show deals right now, since we're just starting up on this effort. Reach out to us at pford@coalitionradio.us. So on that note, we will say good night.
We've taken to calling it Wine with DeWine, but his health director, Amy Acton, who is otherwise great, literally says guesstimating.